Okay, so I did the Air Force on the Eastern Front, aka the Soviet Union. And this right here is the basically like the Soviet Air Force's symbol, flag, whatever you want to call it.
I know. I'm disgusted with beaches. Okay, go.
Okay, so first, something important to talk about is the Lend-Lease aid, because that's where a lot of the Soviets got their materials. So it came from Western countries, basically U.S., the U.K., Canada. Mostly, I would say it came from the U.S. The total aid amount was $42 to $50 billion and around 17.5 million tons of resources throughout World War I. Around 50 to 80% of that was metal alloy, basically steel, cable, lead, and aluminum, and that's what was used for their Air Force. So another important thing to talk about was the training of pilots. They did have a fighter pilot school, but that closed in September of 1933. So not very helpful. But basically, what they had you do was called basically learn as you fight, which is not ideal. So probably one of the most famous people who did really, really well from Learn As You Fight was Air Marshal Ivan Kostub, which is this guy. He got a stamp, which is pretty cool. And he flew a lot of planes, and I'm pretty sure he was one of the most successful fighter pilots in World War II. But a lot of them were just really underprepared, and the Soviet Union itself was underprepared, as they didn't have a pilot school, and it just wasn't really a great situation. Okay, so first we're going to talk about the Ilyushin IL-2 Sturmovik. Sturmovik basically just means fighter plane. Basically, this plane was a ground attack bomber plane, and it was the single most produced military aircraft. And this was really used in the Battle of Kursk. I'm going to really quick pull up a quote. Basically, in the Battle of Kursk, it ended up claiming 270 tanks and 2,000 men in 2 hours of fighting just from the Sturmovik. But the thing is that they had really inaccurate attacks because it's a bomber plane, and a lot of bomber planes just didn't have very accurate attacks. And this was a low to mid altitude range plane, and it was also called the flying tank because it was just really well produced. Stalin had a quote about this plane that I thought was really funny. But basically he said, "You have let down our country and our Red Army. You have the nerve not to manufacture IL-2s until now. Our Red Army needs IL-2 aircraft like the air it breathes, like the bread it eats. Shankman produces 1 IL a day, and Tretyakov builds 1 or 2 MiG-3s daily. It is a mockery of our country and the Red Army. I ask you not to try the government's patience and demand that you manufacture more ILs. This is my final warning." So Stalin was very fond of this plane. This was produced pretty late in World War II. I didn't write it down, but I'm pretty sure it was in 1944 or maybe earlier, but it's pretty late in World War II. It ended up to have 36,183 units of this plane was produced, and with its successor, the IL-10, a total of 42,330 were built. So lots of these planes were manufactured, and they were used a lot. And it was retired in the 50s. So next we'll talk about the Yakovich 3, Yakolev, not Yakovich, 3. It entered service in July 1944. 4,848 were built. It was built by the Yakolev Design Bureau. This was a single-engine, single-seat, and it was successful in dogfights, which are basically like close-range plane fights in lower altitudes. Yeah, really good plane. And then next is the Yak-9. This was introduced in October 1942. 16,769 were made. This was anti-tank, light bomber, long-range escort, used for a lot of things. This was a more reliable engine than the predecessors, and they had a lot more fewer losses of this plane. This was just a really reliable plane, and it wasn't shot down very often, so they used this a lot. Next is the Lava Chicken 7. Sorry. This was introduced in June 1944. 5,753 of these were built, and it was made by the Lava Chicken Design Bureau. A lot of these planes use Schwack cannons, and because that was just like the gun at the time, I guess. These used 2 of them and could hold 200 kilograms of bombs. So, and this was used with low to medium altitude, so this was a bomber plane mostly. But it could also do some fighting, but not as good as like dogfights like the Shermavik was. This is the Tupolev 2. This was introduced in 1942, so it was one of the more earlier planes. 2,257 of these were produced. This was made by Andrei Tupolev. These are one of the few, or most of the planes at this time are twin-engined. And this was a daylight and front-line bomber, and it was a heavy fighter plane. So as you can see, this is a bit bigger than the ones that we've seen before. More of the like the gunner planes and stuff like that. And this handled more just like bombing and stuff like that. So this is the Yak-6. This is just kind of like one of my fun ones that I came across and I thought was super interesting. This was introduced in 1942. 384 of these were produced. This had an all-wood construction with linen sheathing, which I thought was super interesting, that they used linen. But my assumption is that like that's just all they had at the time, because of just the amount of like metal alloy that they got from the Lend-Lease aid. This was twin-engined and it had double seats, and this was more of a transport aircraft. But yeah, I just liked this plane. I thought it was cool. And this is my more excited.
That's good. You got a lot of planes in.
Yes.
And did you have any examples of the other one besides the Sturmovik at Kursk in battle? Or?
No, I just thought that like that was the most like good, the best representation of like how awesome that plane was and how like successful it was in the battles and stuff that it was in.
Yeah. Good job. Yeah. Well, the thing was, much of the area that built still was taken by the Germans, so they were trying to find Indian.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right. Now, like I did Lend-Lease, that was good. All right, good job. Yeah, the Nürnberg fight was kind of a disaster. You got the highly trained German pilots. All right, so. Danny, am I on? I'm going to wait a little. Oh, you don't have your script. Okay. Karen, you go. Okay.
All right.
Monty.
Old Monty.
didn't move it. I know, I've let everybody down again. All right, give me a second on my pen.
All right.
All right, okay, go.
So, here's Bernard Montgomery. He was born in 1887. He was like 20s, maybe even like late teens. He enrolled in the Sandhurst Royal Military College. He was almost expelled though for being rowdy and violent. So he fought other students. He fought like 4 people in a brawl. But he graduated anyway, and he was commissioned to the Royal Warwickshire Regiment. And in that regiment, he was an adjutant, which is basically an assistant to the senior officer up there. There we go. So he actually fought in World War I. He was in the 10th Brigade, 4th Division. He was fighting on the Belgian border. He was shot through the lung and the knee by a sniper. Pretty grievous wounds. An ally of his tried to save him, but the sniper ended up shooting the ally in the head. And actually, Montgomery said that I think that chap took more bullets that were intended for me. So, but he made a miraculous recovery. They were actually about to give up on him. But yeah, he recovered and he returned to the Western Front and just rose through the ranks. He was an officer in many divisions, and he even gained the temporary rank of lieutenant colonel. Between the wars, he got married. He married Betty Carver in 1927. Sadly, 10 years later, she died from sepsis. But after the funeral, he insisted on just launching himself back into military work. And right before World War II started, he became brigadier of the 9th Infantry Brigade. So this is pretty much everything Almonte participated in. The Battle of France, North African Campaign, El Alamein, the Tunisian Campaign, Sicily, Italy, Normandy, that's the big one. Advanced on the Rhine, Market Garden, and Battle of the Bulge. Yeah, here's the big one, Operation Overlord. So, Winston Churchill and Eisenhower were considering another general, Sir Harold Alexander. But colleague of Monty's, Sir Alan Brooke, convinced him otherwise. So Montgomery became the commander of the ground forces instead. Although he was replaced starting September by Eisenhower. Monty resented this change. We'll soon find out why. But as compensation, he was promoted to field marshal. Quick little side story here. So during my research on this picture, this guy right here, he's Jack Churchill, not related to Winston, but he was nicknamed Mad Jack. Here he is on D-Day, and he didn't have any guns on him. But what he did bring was a Scottish-style basket-hilted sword that you can see him holding right there. And he brought a longbow as well. That was very cool. He did well despite his unorthodox loadout. He captured 40 Germans, I believe. But yeah, I found that very interesting.
Lawnmowers are good against seconds.
Of course. Okay, here's a little bit about his personality. No one really liked him. He was difficult to work with, very egotistical, full of himself, and overly patriotic. Britain. And so this during the North African campaign, he had a little bet with Walter Bedell Smith. That was an American general who fought alongside him. And the bet was basically that Walter Bedell Smith jokingly said that if you and your men can capture Sfax, that's a city in Tunisia, if you can capture Sfax like for so and so day, I'll get you a flying fortress, complete with crew. And Flying Fortress was the nickname for, I think it was a Boeing a B-17 plane. So Walter forgot all about it. Monty did not, and so he basically demanded him the plane, complete with crew. I think he eventually got that plane, courtesy of Sir Alan Brooke, his colleague. But he basically threw a fit over that bet. So the style as a general, he took excessive caution, and you really worked with Britain's best interests, all to gain like post-war influence and publicity. And so there's this. He had to make it seem like Britain was pulling a lot of the weight in the war, while also keeping casualties low. And so the people he conflicted with most were like Eisenhower, Bradley, even his own colleague, Sir Alan Brooke, didn't like him that much. Here's Montgomery and Eisenhower chatting in Holland. They must have known the camera was wrong because they looked friendly there, but they really didn't like each other. After World War II, I became part of the Allied Control Council and the chief of the Imperial Staff in Britain. He proposed a little master plan to the Prime Minister at the time, and that master plan was to exploit resources in Northern Africa or some of the colonies. They would exploit those resources to make up for lost influence in Eastern Asia. Obviously, that was rejected. Dumb idea. He hid behind another, I think he was like a lieutenant or something, but Kenneth Crawford. So he hid behind him and had Crawford attend all his meetings for him while he pretty much sulked at home or in his office. He was eventually replaced by Sir William Slim, but then he became the chairman of WUDO, that's the Western Union Defense Organization, and he even became Eisenhower's deputy in NATO. Eventually, in '76, he died from unspecified cause. So this guy, he had some hot takes. Being like the Imperial Chief of Staff, he got to travel around a lot, so he went to places like South Africa, he took a trip to China. So he publicly supported apartheid, and the awful segregation there, and he was impressed by Mao Zedong's leadership in China. He also spoke out against gay legislation in Britain. So that's not good. So legacy, he's World War II status. If you're a historical figure from World War II, you're bound to be highly revered in such a manner, especially with a statue like that. But he's probably one of the most controversial generals of all time, especially in British history, because of his style with fighting for publicity rather than freedom. So, yep, he's problematic. He was a scoundrel. And it's a good representation for, like, even a sorry state for the Allies. Like, Germany and Hitler, they weren't great, but apparently neither were some parts of the Allies, and he's a perfect representation for the sorry state that the Allies still happen to be. That's
Hey, learn about Montgomery. It makes sense, but I never really thought of him as fighting all the time. Sanders. I think he's the one who liked him, so we fought all the time. And then they get the big joke about him. Everyone despises him. Yeah, amazing character. You know, good. Sad about it. That is all.
Yeah.
All right, good job. Not there. Okay, so we still need a few more. We kind of got Friday because it was such a weird day. Okay, so I do have a few turned in. So can you guys go today? Is that possible? So I asked Lily, can you go today or do you want to go? Gotta get going. We need some people to go. Anybody else willing to go? Want to go, Brian? Okay. Thank you, Brian. You're going to be. I know we're a little bit off because we couldn't set this up on Friday because school was optional. No comment. Oh, thank you. Give me 1 sec. I got tagged to school.
Okay, so I did allied tanks. Well, all the tanks that I will be talking about are actually just American. Tanks, wonderful. They were invented in 1916 by the British, and at first they were unreliable and very slow-paced. And they were first used in World War I. Then in the middle of World War I, J. Walter Christie, he came up with new designs to make the tanks faster and to be in action longer and to be essential weapons. During World War II, thousands of tanks were produced each month. Thousands of tanks. And they could finally go hundreds of miles. In the US, they produced 88,430 tons. Pretty crazy. So the material they used was armored steel, which is steel, except it was processed a certain way, so there was resistance for when it was punctured and also blasting protection. So they used armored steel for armor mostly. And then they used aluminum alloy, which is aluminum but mixed with other metals to make it stronger and whatnot. They used that mostly for light tanks, so it's a lighter metal, obviously. And then they used steel plates for the tracks. It's being upset.
Lost the mouse.
I did, somehow. Oh, there it is. It's, oh, okay. So, tanks that were roughly 17 to 40 tons. Lighter tanks were more, 17, 20, whatnot. And then the heavy tanks, they were like 40 tons. And the guns that they used were like 75 to 90 millimeter guns. And they were usually like 2 to 3 meters tall, but some of them could be even taller. During World War II, the British manufactured 24,800 tanks. And the U.S. is more, I don't know, their original tanks were the M1 combat car, M2 light tank, M2 medium tank, M3 Lee, and M4 Sherman, which I won't. M4 Sherman, woo! So this tank was originally the M3 Lee medium tank, but they changed it up a bit and decided to use a different gun and whatnot. So this is M3 Lee. It had 2 guns. This one did not function, which is kind of useless. And then they changed it into the M4 Sherman. So we have M3 Lee and the Sherman. So they got rid of the tiny useless gun. That's mostly what they did, but they also did some other changes. So this gun was first used in 1942, so more later in the war. And this was, when I say gun, I like tank. This was the most produced tank. They used it all the time, and after World War II, it was also in Iraq War, Korean War, many, many, many wars. I couldn't find the exact date because they kept changing it throughout World War II. Like, it wasn't always the same. So it was 33 to 42 tons, and then 100 to 150 miles OPR, which is operational range. So that's how far they could go in combat. And it wasn't that fast, but not many tanks were. It was 22 to 30 miles per hour. 26 Pershing. This was a medium tank. It was first classified as a heavy tank, but then they decided to say that it's a medium tank. So this was named after John J. Pershing, who was the general who led the American expeditionary force in Europe in World War I. So originally, their plan was to have this be the replacement for M4 Sherman. However, not many were in combat, and it was much harder to produce. So it was not really a replacement for M4 Sherman. And also, this tank was below the Tiger II German tank, so it was ranked very high. And the first shipment of M26 arrived in Antwerp in 1945, so very late in the war. This tank could go 100 miles OPR and 30 miles per hour, so alright. And then it was 46.1 tons. So heavy. It was heavy. Obviously.
Good question.
So the OPR, is that like, that's the life of it, it can go 100 miles with that, or is it like on maybe like gas? Like how's that measured?
So I'm not 100% sure. I tried to look it up, but it wasn't really coming up. I'm guessing it's like not dead right at, is it?
So what do you, I didn't hear the question.
Like, what does OPR mean? Like, is that like a
Operational rate,
Yeah.
No, I know, but like, so it goes 100 miles and then it's over for that tank, or?
approximately, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they ran out of fuel really fast.
You can't, can you refuel it? Like,
Yeah, sure, you can
Okay.
refill, but no, 100 miles and that's it. You know.
Yeah. Like, what's that?
Okay.
Alright. So T-20, this was in a series of tanks consisting of this medium tank and T-22, which was also a medium tank, and T-23. So these tanks were supposed to be the successor to M4 Shermans. They were supposed to be better. However, they were going to use a 76 millimeter gun, which is about 2.99 inches, pretty much 3 inches. But the idea was rejected by the Armored Ground Force. So this was not mass produced. There were not many of these. So I couldn't really find what other wars or battles they were in because not many were functioning or in combat. And the armor that was used was 62 millimeters thick, and this tank was 29.83 tons, and could go 99 miles until and can only go 25 miles per hour. So, M24 Shapley. This was a light tank. That's what I found. It's a light tank. And it was designed and used in 1944. It was a pretty good tank, however, because it was so late in the war, it wasn't really known. Like, not many people knew about the tank because it was used in 1944. However, after the war, it was in the Vietnam War and Korean War and like 10 other wars or battles. It was a pretty successful tank. That's good. And this had and the Shapley had a 75 millimeter gun as well. Oh, and the M26 Pershing, that one had a 90 millimeter gun, which was pretty common at the time. And it could go 35 miles per hour and 100 miles per hour. And thank God I'm done.
None. So any evaluation, which tank was the best, most important?
M4 Sherman, it was the most produced, so that one.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, good job. The major problem with Sherman, it had a gasoline engine. You see the problem with having gasoline.
What about like other engines?
Most of them got diesel.
Diesel.
Diesel doesn't. All right, good job. Derek, you want to go? Vibration. All right. All right. Good job so far. Give me 1 sec. Go.
All right, Bagration was the Soviet counterpart to D-Day. It was a Soviet-led attack on the Eastern Front. He said while D-Day was being fought, Bagration began. Stalin named it Operation Bagration after Pyotr Bagration, who fought against Napoleon 100 years earlier. Along the Eastern Front, Soviet forces were split into four main groups under Generals Vasilevsky and Zhukov. Stalin wished to attack in the middle, but obviously, if he attacked here and didn't attack here, forces could be pinched off, so they used the trident method. He would use the two middle forces in the center, and the other two forces would stay above and below where they were. The attacks began in the south through Ukraine to deceive the true intention of the attacks. First phase, attacks began on June 23rd, 1944. Germans believed the main attack would be through Ukraine, so they directed most of their forces through that bottom corridor. The real attack came swiftly through the Belarusian Strait, which is kind of east of Minsk. Hitler gave some weird commands during Bagration, one of them being he ordered the German troops to not create defensive lines, so they would just attack and then retreat and run away if they lost. Attacks. At the northern attack, the cities Beit, Kiev, and Orsha were the first targets. They were liberated on June 24th. Because of the Soviet Air Force, the German troops couldn't really travel during the day because it was too open, and they would just be bombed. On the bottom of the trident, the fortress cities of Bogusk and Slutsk were in the path. The Soviet firepower and coordination were able to smash through the line at Slutsk, and that allowed Bogusk to fall quickly after that. The corridor in the middle. At the city of Mogilev, which lay directly east of Minsk, which was the Belarusian capital, and Belarusia was the spot. It wasn't directly like the Soviet Union, but all the, I guess, the countries like Ukraine and Belarus and those ones. Germans were under heavy attack. The German 12 Corps and 39 Panzer Corps retreated out of Mogilev and fell right into the trap that the Soviets had laid for them. Mogilev was liberated on June 28, 1944, which opened more places for the Red Army to kind of progress and advance from. So far, Bagration was a huge success. Minsk and Polotsk. Stalin's main goal was to capture the Belarusian capital of Minsk from the Germans. They began attacks on June 28th, and by July 3rd, Minsk was cut off and liberated from the Germans. Up north, the troops pushed the Germans back to Polotsk, which is up there, the second center. By July 4th, Polotsk was liberated, and Belarusia was kind of like guaranteed on all three fronts, the north, the middle, and the south. Northward and westward. After the successful capture of Belarusia, the Red Army turned north and started pushing west. Cities Silesia and Vilnius in Lithuania were liberated very shortly after they were attacked in July. The city of Kaunas was liberated on August 1st in 1944, which is, I believe, in Lithuania also. Poland. Białystok was taken by the Soviets after just 2 days of fighting right there. And that victory led to the Lublin, Brest, and Auschwitz offensives that would be the last pushes of Bagration, would be the last advances of the Red Army. In mid-August, the Germans were able to form a defensive position on Neru River right here, and they kind of kept Warsaw too. The Germans held the position until January 1945. Aftermath was a stunning victory. The quickness of the Soviets pushing back the Germans after they had already been in war for so long. 57,000 German prisoners were sent to Moscow, and they paraded them through the streets of Moscow, and they were spit on and thrown, people threw a bunch of stuff at them. Dealt a fatal blow to the Germans and allowed for a western push from the Allies after D-Day. It triggered the Warsaw Uprising, which failed. It was like a group of people in Warsaw who tried to overthrow the Germans. It failed, but it showed the loss of control that the Germans had in areas like Poland. Casualties: 17 German divisions were completely wiped out. Just under 500,000 Germans were killed, wounded, or missing. The Soviets had just over 500,000 casualties, and before the Germans would leave a town, they would like completely strip it of the resources and burn it so the Soviets couldn't get anything. So there would be even more casualties with that. And then works cited, that's Bagration, that's the generals, and then those are some Red Army soldiers.
And they hated each other, didn't they?
Yeah.
Skotsky, Zukov?
Yeah.
Which one's Zukov?
I think he's on the right, yeah.
Yeah, this was a Titanic offensive. Yeah, it's a great story. And a lot of stuff happened. Yeah, the Warsaw, they rose up, and they didn't want the Soviet government, so they rose up hoping that they would have be Soviet. The Soviets did not help. That would be slaughtered. All right, and on that happy note, good job, everybody. So we're just going to start and go right down the road on Thursday. Sound good? That'll be about 10 minutes each. You want to hear my one story about Rodzikowski?
Yes.
He would be part of the purges in 37, 38, the Soviet purges, where they got rid of most of the officers of the Red Army. He somehow survived, but he would be tortured to give up names. And everybody gives up names. He was tortured. They took a ball-peen hammer and chipped and knocked out every tooth. So, and all he had was these jagged humps. And then Stalin needed him and was trying to be a field marshal in the Soviet army. Yep, the Soviet Union. All right. Good job. We got tanks. We got all kinds of stuff. Good job. And the Soviet Air Force.